Today I'm going to be doing my updated ranking of all 32 MCU movies. So let's get started. So first off, we have Ant-Man and the Wasp. I'm going to say C. It's kind of a forgettable villain. It's a decent movie overall, it's funny, but it's kind of middle of the pack. Next we have Ant-Man. I'll say B. It's funny, it's not huge stakes or anything like that. The villain can be forgettable, but it has some really funny fight scenes like on Thomas the Train and stuff like that. Next, Avengers Age of Ultron. I personally think this is an overhated MCU movie. I personally think it's a B tier. I think it's a much better villain than Loki, to be honest, from Avengers, the first Avengers. I just think it's a really good movie overall, some really nice moments in it. Next, Avengers Endgame. Easily S tier. One of the best last hours of any movie ever. It pays off 10 years worth of movies. Really incredible. Same thing with Infinity War here. I love it simply because it's different. The heroes actually lose in this one, which is really interesting. Movies don't tend to do that. It's normally the heroes win every time. This time the heroes lose. There's legitimate stakes and sacrifice that has to be made. Next, Black Panther. I'm going to say B. The CGI is awful at the end, but it's a good story overall. It's not one I rewatch all the time, but I think it does have some rewatchability to it. It's a really great movie overall. Next, Captain America Civil War. I actually changed opinions on this. Last time I had an A tier, but I personally think it's S tier. It's just great conflict, especially the final battle between Tony and Captain America. It's really great story, really well put together, and I think it deserves S tier. Next, Captain America, the first Avengers. I'll say B tier. We have a lot of B tiers, but definitely a great movie. Overall, it's a great way to set up Captain America. I like how it goes back in time and stuff like that. I think the villain isn't the strongest, but it does set up Captain America as a character. Next, Captain America Winter Soldier. Probably A tier, has some of the best fight scenes in the MCU to date. I think it's a great watch. I love the conflict between Bucky and Captain America. I think it's really great overall. I think it's close to S tier, but I wouldn't quite put it on the same level as these movies up here. Captain Marvel. I'm going to give it D tier. The Nick Fury and Goose are like the only cool parts of this movie, to be honest. The rest is kind of bland. They waste Ronan in it. Not that great of a movie. Next, Doctor Strange. I'll put it B or C. I'll put it in C just because it has a forgettable villain. It's really good at setting up Doctor Strange. I love his backstory and stuff like that. I think that's incredible. But the villain is forgettable. If you think of MCU villains, you hardly remember him. Next, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Easy A tier. One of my favorite MCU movies. It's ahead of Captain America Winter Soldier for me. It's really great. The humor is great. The villain has higher stakes this time. It's personal for Peter Quill. I just love the Guardians movies. They're amazing. Next, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1. This is going to be S tier. It's just a great way. It's unique. They kind of introduced not that well-known characters in MCU, but everyone came to love them. I think it's awesome, funny. The soundtrack is amazing. Same thing with Volume 2. The soundtrack's amazing. Definitely deserves S tier. Next, we have the first Iron Man. This is the first Iron Man, right? No, this is the second Iron Man. I'll give that one... I'll give it C tier. The villain is okay. It's not that great, but I think it's great for Tony overall. It's showing his not maturity, but like growing up and stuff like that. Basically, learning to not be so selfish, I guess. Next we have Iron Man 3. This one I'll put right above Iron Man 2. I think it's better. I think the final fight is cool with all the Iron Man suits. Again, the villain is not that exciting, but it does provide a good threat for Iron Man. And he's out of his element a lot of the movie without a suit, which I think is really interesting. Now Iron Man 1, this will be an A tier, because this is a great start to the MCU. Starts Tony Stark off as this snobby billionaire who doesn't really care about anyone, and you can see character development in him. Spider-Man Far From Home. Wait, is this Far From Home? I think so. So Spider-Man Far From Home here. I think it's overhated for definitely. I'm gonna give it B tier. Most people probably put it in D tier. So I think it's a pretty good movie. Mysterio is really interesting. I like all the stuff they do with the robots and drones and stuff like that. I think some of the plot points are kind of dumb, like Tony giving Spider-Man those glasses, which were like kill a bunch of people. I think that was dumb. But there's some good moments in the movie. Next, Spider-Man, Homecoming. I'm gonna give this one an A tier. It's a pretty good villain to start off. Peter Parker and is just beginning his journey basically after Civil War. I think it's a great start for Spider-Man's journey throughout the MCU. I think it starts relationships like with MJ and stuff early on. You can see that growth throughout the entire trilogy. Next, original Avengers. That'll be an A tier. Great team up movie. I think it's just incredible seeing all the different movies that they produce come together into one for the first time. It's really a cool experience. Next, Incredible Hulk. I think this one's overhated as well, but most people will probably put it in F tier. I'm gonna give it C tier. I think I might have put it in D tier last time. I think I'm gonna put it in C tier. The Abomination is a decent villain. You can see him again in She-Hulk, but She-Hulk's just garbage, so I don't think that's really important. But the main problem is that they changed actors between Edward Norton and Mark Ruffalo. I think they should have stuck with him, the original, because I think he's a better Bruce Banner. Thor Ragnarok, one of my favorite MCU movies. S tier. The humor's funny, and it's a great character development for Thor, and I think it's really funny. It's much better than the first two Thor movies. The first two Thor movies are not that good, as you'll see here in a minute, but I think it's just an incredible movie. I laugh every time. It's really funny to me, and one of my favorite MCU movies and movies of all time. Next, we have Thor: Dark World, F tier. A really forgettable villain, pretty bad plot points, just bad in general. If you've seen the movie, you know why. Thor, I'm gonna put in C tier. There's not much Thor to it because he doesn't have his powers for like 75% of the movie, which makes it literally just a regular guy on Earth. There's nothing too exciting to it. I mean, Heimdall's pretty cool in it and stuff like that, and the Frost Giants, and the Battle on the Rainbow Bridge, but not that good. Black Widow, I think it is overhated. I agree with they fumbled Taskmaster. It was a pretty bad twist. They should have kept with the original Taskmaster and what he was like in the comics. 10 times cooler than what he is in this movie. I'm gonna give it like a low C tier. I don't think it's as bad as Captain Marvel. I think some of the action scenes are cool, especially with Black Widow's adoptive father, Red Guardian. He's pretty funny in it, but not as bad as Captain Marvel, and not quite as good as this Thor. Next, Shang-Chi. I'm gonna give it A tier. They bring the Mandarin full circle from Iron Man 3 back to Shang-Chi. I think there's some humor elements to it. It has some really great martial arts fighting in it. The ending is just a bit kind of like a big CGI battle. That's kind of the bad part because it's just a bunch of CGI dragons and stuff like that. But it's a really good movie overall. Eternals, F tier. Introduced way too much, way too much at once. You couldn't really follow it. It kept going back in time in the present day. Really messed with the story. Hardly any character development at all. It's just really bland. It might be the worst. I think it might be the worst movie in the MCU. Spider-Man No Way Home, 100% S tier. The fan service is amazing in it with Tobey Maguire Spider-Man and Andrew Garfield Spider-Man. All three generations of Spider-Man into one movie is awesome. The villains are really good. They bring villains from all the different movies and stuff. I think it's great. The only part I don't like is how Doctor Strange was just fine with giving Peter Parker that spell, not thinking about the consequences. But I kind of ignore that in a way because just seeing all three Spider-Man is amazing. Sorry about it cutting off there for a second. Back to what I was saying about Doctor Strange being Multiverse of Madness being in D tier. There's not enough multiverse to it, in my opinion, and The infight is okay, but I feel like it's a bunch of wasted potential with the Illuminati and stuff like that. With the different variants, they all get killed off like instantly by Doctor Strange. It was pretty bad in my opinion. Thor: Love and Thunder, the most disappointing movie in the entire MCU by far. I think it's the second worst MCU movie. I think it's worse than Thor: The Dark World, simply because it did not live up to expectations. The humor really fell flat, and I think Gore the God Butcher was okay in it. I just think it was a very bland film overall. The humor did not stick. It felt like a self-parody of itself. It was not that good at all. I really did not enjoy the movie. It especially did not live up to the hype of Thor Ragnarok had. It was not nearly as good. You can see it literally on the two opposite ends of the spectrum, with Thor Ragnarok being S tier and the next movie and the same director being F tier. It just shocking is how bad it was. Wakanda Forever, I'll put it on the same level with Black Panther. It couldn't really do much since Chadwick Boseman had passed away, but it did well addressing that in the beginning. But I don't know, some of the fight scenes just didn't give off a good vibe, and like the story progressing stuff, I think it was way too long. It felt like you were sitting there for like 3.5 hours compared to like the 2.5 hours it actually was. It just felt really long and drawn out. Quantumania, I think it's either B or A tier for me. I've seen it twice. I think I would put it in A tier. I think Kang is great in it. I think it's a great... I don't know why people get so much hate. I understand why the plot can be a little clunky at times. But I think it's a great story overall and development for Scott Lang as a character and with casting and everything. But yeah, I don't see why people tend to put it in like D and F tier. Next, the brand new movie that just came out, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. I will try to stay spoiler free talking about it in case you haven't seen it yet. But I know most people would put it in S tier. I'm going to put it, it is literally teetering on the edge of S and A tier, but I think in the end it falls to A tier because I think the soundtrack is great. The villain is great. It makes he's like probably you don't feel any sympathy for the villain at all just because how evil he is. I think the story is way too fast at the beginning and it's a little too clunky at the beginning. That is the only thing holding it back from the S tier. Everything else is great. I'd give it a 9 out of 10. Literally the clunkiness of the story at the beginning, and just kind of felt like it was just throwing random stuff in at the beginning that wasn't really needed. But the final half of the movie was incredible. That's the only thing with holding it from S tier for me. So there you have it. That is my ranking of all 32 MCU movies. Let me know your ranking down below if you would like, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.